So Coraline's gotten pretty popular, huh? I mean, I remember when this movie came out, it got kinda overlooked. But in the 15 years since then, Coraline has become a pretty big deal, which is cool to see because it has been one of my all-time favorite movies for so long. And this video is not about that. Do you know there's a Coraline video game? Yeah, way back when the film first dropped, we got a tie-in video game for the PS2, Wii, and Nintendo DS. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. First, a bit of context. Coraline is a 2009 stop-motion animated film by Laika Studios. You know stop motion. That kind of animation where you take a toy, you pose it frame by frame, you take individual photos, then you play it all back at speed and realize you've been working for 6 months and only have like 2 minutes of finished animation. Then you cry, and then you die. Laika is one of the only major studios still doing this kind of animation, and Coraline was their first big mainline film. It's based on a book by Neil Gaiman from 2002 and directed by Henry Selick, the guy who did Nightmare Before Christmas. Yes, Nightmare was directed by Henry Selick, not Tim Burton. Tim Burton had nothing to do with Coraline. It's a very common mistake. And it's all about a girl named Coraline, of course, who moves into this big new boarding house called the Pink Palace. Her parents are super work-focused and neglectful, especially her mom. So, left to her own devices, Coraline explores this weird old house and finds a hidden door that leads to a parallel world. A world that's just like the one she lives in now, but seemingly better in every way. Complete with her other mother, who, spoilers I guess, is secretly a demon thing called the Beldam who tricks sad kids into believing she'll make all of their wishes come true, so they'll stay in this other world and let her sew buttons into their eyes so that she can, I don't know, eat their souls or something. This is my favorite movie. Or, it's very close to my favorite movie. I sort of alternate between Coraline and Nightmare Before Christmas. Nightmare is the more nostalgic one for me, but I just love every single thing about the Coraline movie. And it's great to see the world finally catching on to just how great this movie is after, like, 15 years. It's really reaching serious cult classic status now. But of course, that does come with some drawbacks. For instance, why are these Coraline games so expensive? The Wii and DS copies we're looking at today cost me around $150 each. The PS2 copy goes for over $200. What is going on? These games better be good for what they cost me. So let's not waste any more time, dust off the old Wii U and 3DS, and get disappointed. First up, Coraline for the Wii. Released in January 2009 and developed by Papaya Studios, who do not exist anymore. Booting this game up, we're greeted with a cutscene meant to set the stage here in kind of a storybook fashion. Honestly, cutscene is a bit generous. This is more like a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation. They're just using photos and key art from the movie to recap the main story beats as quickly as humanly possible. It's boring, it's lame, and it's boring. At least they got Keith David to do the narration. That's a nice touch, and also probably where a lot of the budget went. After the slideshow ends, we get an actual cutscene with like animations and stuff, and honestly, things look pretty solid. And nothing mind-blowing, but for a 2000s movie tie-in game on Wii, this doesn't look that bad at all. And Coraline's mom's all like, "Hello, child I regret. Go push and stand on that box, over there." And Coraline's like, "Okay." It's pretty basic tutorial stuff. I push a box, I stand on the box, and then I'm told to buzz off and bother my dad. And just like the movie, Dad gives me a list of random busy work that is longer than his neck. Dude's gotta see a doctor about that thing. That can't be normal. Stack newspapers, water the plants, find a bunch of stuff that's blue. Blue! I'm sure you're wondering. And yes, this is very boring. You could argue maybe it's boring on purpose because of the story it's telling, but it's still boring. But it does give me time to acclimate to this game's setup. Coraline for the Wii is a 3D action-adventure game. You run around, you climb stuff, and you collect things. Except, I'm a big fat liar. I just lied to you. This game is pretending to be an action-adventure game, but is all a front for a cheap minigame compilation. Basically, every task you're given throughout this game is either a complete nothing burger, just click the button and you win, or it's some kind of cheap minigame for babies. Match the patterns, go fish, memory tile games, finish the jigsaw puzzle, shoot things with a slingshot within the time limit. And just about all of them are completely devoid of challenge. Even the shooting things with the slingshot has auto-aim. It's honestly mind-numbing. But either way, the game continues as you'd expect. Coraline meets her neighbors, Mr. Bobinski, Miss Spink, Miss Forcible, and of course, Wybie, the awkward neighbor boy who gives her a doll that he found that just happens to look exactly like Coraline. In the movie, this is how the other mother is able to spy on Coraline and figure out how to best trap her, looking through the doll's eyes. In the game, they don't do that. Actually, they don't mention the doll at all. I think they just kind of forgot that part. Boy, I hope this does not become a pattern. Not long after that, Coraline finds the door to the other world and meets her other mother. And in terms of the gameplay, the other world changes absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's still mostly just walking from one end of the house to the other to play the same minigames over and over and over again. Like, the other mother cooks pancakes and is challenging me to catch them as they're flipped. But I'm told to watch out for the worms and bugs, which begs the question, why? Why are there worms and bugs in the same pan as the pancakes? Other mother, I know you're shown eating chocolate beetles later on in the movie, but that's after Coraline's found out that you're a demon. Right now, you're supposed to be convincing her that this place is safe, but you're throwing boiling hot worms at her face? Your plan is riddled with holes. So I'm sure it's clear from the recap I've given here and my general tone that I'm not really impressed with anything happening in the game so far. And I'm not. This feels like some kind of baby game. Like, why is Coraline, a movie that looks like this, playing like a Sesame Street game? It just feels like such a waste of potential. But then, right at the end of Coraline's first night in the other world, something interesting happens. Instead of just jumping from the other world right back to the real world, we get a completely original dream sequence. Coraline is lost in the woods at night, but sees Wybie running away from something. So now, in order to catch up to Wybie, you have to find your way through the woods using a jar of fireflies to light your way. And if you run out of light, then these demonic rats will swarm and attack you. It's an actual, like game. You have a health meter, you can die, it's a game. It's not just a bunch of baby mini games, and it's not lifted directly from the movie. It's an actual, honest-to-God Coraline video game segment using a unique idea. I mean, it's still not hard or anything like that, but my god, it's an actual game for a minute. It even ends with a kinda creepy scene where Wybie is panicking and confused with buttons suddenly in his eyes before the Beldam's arm shoots out from the ground and steals him away. This was the first time the game actually made me kinda sit up in my seat and pay attention, instead of just, slowly atrophying to dust and goo. And every trip to the other world in this game ends with one of these creepy stealth dream sequences. And they get more and more involved every time. The next one has me pushing these Dr. Seuss looking blocks to open doors, stacking things to climb cliffs, and all the while still having to use the fireflies to keep me safe from rats, but now also these giant snapdragon plants too. The final of these segments even brings in some much needed challenge, forcing me to actually conserve my light and run through the dark unprotected, all while the Beldam's hands keep shooting out from these mirrors. Yeah, I know I'm kind of skipping a lot of other parts of the game here to talk about these, but the rest of the game looks like this. And this. And this! They literally programmed an entire section where the only goal is to walk around the house as slow as you possibly can so that your mom doesn't catch you. Go to one door, it's locked. Go to another door, it's locked. Find the key, get back to the door, leave, that's it. And if you're caught, you're immediately sent right back to the start. You see, this is how you do stealth gameplay wrong. All kinds of wrong. More or less, all the gameplay sections based on stuff from the movie are bland, boring, and just so slow. These dream sections, on the other hand, are actually pretty fun, are completely different from all other parts of the game, and aren't just scenes ripped straight from the movie. It's not award-winning gameplay or anything like that, but it's so refreshing by comparison. I even managed to die a couple of times in the later segments, and
do not go through the door.
Whoa! That is a dark continue screen. That's genuinely kind of unnerving. I don't even think the movie ever showed Coraline with the buttons actually sewn into her eyes. That's freaky. But even though the game's been mostly uneventful so far, things do start to pick up after the last dream sequence. Of course, the story gets more serious once the other mother offers Coraline the opportunity to stay with her forever, so long as she lets her sew those soulless black buttons into Coraline's eyes. This freaks Coraline out, so she runs back to the real world and gets hit by a bike. Oh my god. Oh, this game is a mess. And what noise was that Wybie made? Perfect, no notes. The gameplay segment that results from this horrific accident is also very bad. You have to use the control stick to keep your balance on the bike as it goes completely ballistic, but surprise, gauging your balance when the bike is having an absolute fit, it's bad. It's very, very bad. Luckily, once that embarrassment is over, we go back to the other world to save the ghost kid's eyes. Wait. Hold on, let me look through my footage here. No. No way. They forgot the ghost children. The game straight up forgot to mention the ghost children at all. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't seen the movie or just needs a refresher, one of the most important moments in Coraline is when the other mother puts her in this timeout inside of a magic mirror. There she meets 3 ghost children who let the beldam sew the buttons into their eyes, and now their souls are trapped in this other world. The entire third act of the movie is focused on Coraline finding the stolen eyes of the ghost children to both set them free and win her own freedom from the beldam. And not a single shred of that is mentioned in this game. I'm 100% serious. The game just plops you back in the other world and says, you have to find the ghost children's eyes, despite the fact that their entire scene was cut out of this version of the story. How do you get something that wrong? How tight of a deadline could these developers possibly have had that they couldn't include one of the most important parts of the story that sets up the entire finale? I don't think it's very good. And the rest of the game really kind of craps its pants after this, because like half of the finale sequence is nothing but quick time events. The game doesn't really have like boss fights or anything, but it has these more exciting set piece cutscenes that just sort of play out while you have to press certain button combinations at the right time. And of course, get a single one wrong and the whole scene resets. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And if it's not quick time events, it's mostly just holding forward on the control stick to balance on a beam, run down a hall, or climb up a spider web. Such a disappointment, man. Even for a kids movie tie-in game, this is just lame. But either way, the finale plays out pretty much as you'd expect. Coraline gets all 3 ghost eyes, throws a cat at the other mother, then climbs through the door back home where she's reunited with her parents and they all live safe and sound. Which of course is just a bit of a fake out ending because the other mother's hand gets broken off in the door and then sneaks into the real world and tries to track down Coraline so that she can steal the secret door key so that she can get her revenge. But luckily the ghost kids warn her beforehand, so she and YB are able to team up and put an end to everything once and for all. And what's that? Game cut all that out. Story just ends as soon as she gets back home? Really? They just cut out the whole ending. Yeah, straight up. As soon as you escape the other world, the game swaps to a cutscene that basically just says, and they lived happily ever after. Roll credits. Okay, genuine question here. Were they just not allowed to include the full ending? Like, this game came out a few weeks before the movie even premiered. Were the devs legit just not allowed to show the full ending because of spoilers or something? I mean, this game is only 3 hours long. It doesn't take much to see the ending. Maybe they wanted to avoid having too many spoilers in the game? Is that why the ghost kids are cut out? I mean, that still wouldn't make sense, because why would you cut that out but leave the entire final confrontation? I don't know, I'm grasping at straws here, people, because this game was a fever dream. Coraline on the Wii, surprise surprise, is a bad game. It's a glorified minigame compilation that can barely tell the story of the film it's based on, and it is an absolute slog to play. Legit, this game's runtime would be cut in half if everything just moved a little bit faster. I have never played a game that is this slow. And I'm a Life is Strange fan. I play some of the most dry, slow-paced Sherlock Holmes adventure detective games for fun. And even compared to all those, this game is slow. And get this, at the end of the credits sequence, I'm asked if I enjoyed the game. Legit, a yes or no prompt showed up. What is this even for? This isn't some online survey or anything. This game's not connected to the internet. How would they even collect this data? And why did the game reward me for saying no? What a waste of potential, man. Coraline could legit make a pretty fun game if you did it right. I mean, you can even see a little bit of that in this Wii version. They're not amazing or based on anything from the movie, but those dream sequences are actually pretty interesting and feel right at home in the world of Coraline. I would have loved to see more of that. But instead, we have a game whose biggest legacy is its baffling price tag and the fact that a small, awkward soundbite from it became a trending TikTok sound a few years ago for no apparent reason.
Don't you dare disobey me, Coraline! Ah!
Ugh, I'm done with this, man. Let's play the DS version. Now, shockingly, this is actually a completely different game. I know, I was surprised. I really thought this would just be a downgraded version of the console game, but it's actually very different. And it actually might be worse. So, Coraline DS was developed by Art Co. Limited, who do not exist anymore, oh boy. And I'll give props right away. For an original Nintendo DS game, this looks really good. Like, actually very impressive. Not many budget DS games would have sprung for full 3D back in those days, so right away, I'm actually very impressed. The game starts differently too, with Coraline and her dad approaching the Pink Palace from the outside and just being like, well, would you look at our new home? Why don't you go look at our new home? And just like that, all of my hope for this game dies like my pancreas. As exploring the house and seeing this game's tutorial, I realize this is it. This is the game. Like, literally, this is all the game is. Walking from one room to another, then being told to walk to a different room so that someone will tell you to walk to another room. I mean, dang, dude, I complained about the console version being a minigame compilation, but at least those were things to do, man. Coraline on DS has next to nothing going on. Yeah, I'd call it a point-and-click adventure, but there's no puzzles. This thing's damn near a visual novel. Yeah, every now and then, I'm talking once in a blue moon here, you'll get a proper minigame to play. And they're pretty much all based on using the DS touchscreen and stylus, which makes me realize there wasn't a whole lot of motion control stuff going on in the Wii version. You had to use it for QuickTime events once or twice, but basically, even for like the balance minigames, you never had to use the motion control. That's a waste of potential. So like, the game doesn't have the dream sequences from the console version, but there is one like nightmare minigame where Coraline's being chased by these ghostly hands, and Coraline runs by herself, so all I had to do was kill the hands by tapping them and scratching at the screen to free Coraline if she got caught by them. Oh, and there's the black cat. I wonder what happens if I click on I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. Was that a jump scare? Did Coraline on DS just try to jump scare me? Why am I offended by that? Why does that piss me off? The worst minigame I saw here was in Mr. Bobinski's Jumping Mouse Circus, which is a thing in the movie, don't worry about it. This was meant to be a rhythm minigame. Tap the right instrument at the right time so the mice can play a song. Thing is, I was absolute garbage at this. I don't know why. I'm a musician, but I just could not keep up with this nonsense. I mean, look at this. I'm dying out there. And yet, somehow, I won. This gameplay was rewarded, and it was at that point that I realized, oh man, there really is no game here. There's barely anything to do, no challenge. It doesn't even matter if you do well. The game won't fail you. This is like the bare minimum to call something an interactive video game. I can't believe I actually missed the minigame compilation. Now, to be fair, this game does get a lot of points for telling the story of Coraline much better. Way more scenes from the movie are actually represented here. There's no voice acting, but the written dialogue actually does have a lot of lines ripped straight from the movie, which the console version surprisingly didn't. And they actually remembered to include the ghost children and the movie's real ending. What do you know? I guess they didn't care about spoilers. Overall, Coraline DS isn't really a game. And usually I hate when people say things like that. I have dealt with so many people saying that my favorite game, Life is Strange, quote unquote, isn't a real game, simply because it's a narrative-focused experience where you mostly just walk, talk, and solve a few puzzles. But Coraline, I genuinely don't know if I can call this a game. Legit, the only situation where I could see someone actually enjoying this would be like in 2009, when the movie was in theaters but not on DVD yet, and you just wanted some way to experience the Coraline story while, I don't know, on a road trip or something. Because there is no gameplay here to hook people. It's just walking from scene to scene with no voice acting, just text on a screen. And if you just want to read Coraline, then boy do I have news for you. All that said, I actually find these games fascinating. They're both really pretty bad, but basically in totally opposite ways. One throws away huge chunks of the story in favor of pointless minigames, and the other is so story-focused that there's basically no game. One actually tries to break away from the source material and do something original occasionally, while the other is basically a bit-crushed version of the movie. I've always been morbidly interested in really bad video games. Call it that angry video game nerd effect, I guess. You gain a whole new appreciation for the things you love when you see those things being absolutely botched. But as bad as they were, and as much as they are a complete waste of potential of one of my favorite films of all time, I actually am kind of glad I played these. Hey, I spent $300 on these pieces of crap. I have to justify it somehow.